This assignment is called monohybrid mice. Monohybrid means that we're just going to exchange one trait at a time. So what I'm going to do in this assignment is you are going to follow along with me for the first two, and then the last two, that's going to be on you. I'll give you a little hint here and there, but I want to see what you're taking from Punnett squares. So let's get into our directions. It says we're going to solve each problem in our work by using a Punnett square. And when we cross these, we're going to be looking for genotypes. We're going to be looking for phenotypes. And we're going to be looking for the probability of getting certain offspring. So here's what we need to know about the mice. Our little cute mice here. These laboratory mice, a gray coat color. Gray is dominant. And we're going to give that dominant allele a capital G. The albino color, albino meaning all white, that is going to be the lowercase g in this case. So our first one that we're going to do here, it says, and you're really going to have to read some directions here and make sure you are really understanding what they're asking for. It says we're going to cross a female, capital G, small g, with a male, small g, small g. So in our Punnett square, we're going to put the female genes on top, and it says that she is capital G, small g. Let me get out of your way here. And that the male is small g, small g. Let's talk about these two mice right now. If the female is capital G, small g, we know that is heterozygous and dominant. Dominant being the key word here, meaning she's gray. The male, two genes that are same, homozygous. He is homozygous, recessive though. He's going to be white, albino. So we've got our genes to cross now. So let's go through, cross our genes, see what we get. All right, Punnett square's done, easy. We've got our information here. Let's go down, get our genotypes and phenotypes. What genotypes do you see? Well, there's one genotype, there's another. So we've got capital G, small g, small g, small g, and the phenotypes. Remember, if it has a dominant gene, and it only takes one, it could have two, but you only need one dominant gene to make these rats or mice gray. Whereas the small g, recessive, homozygous recessive, those are going to be albino. We have all the information now that we need to complete all the questions that are over here. So let's get into these questions and follow along with me. What is the probability of getting gray offspring? Let's look at our Punnett square. Gray offspring, we've got four opportunities for offspring to get these kind of genes, and it looks like there's a 50% possibility of getting gray offspring. So 50% there. Second question should be pretty easy since we just solved the first one. What's the probability of getting albino offspring? Well, there they are, right there. That's going to be another 50%. Third question, how many possible genotypes are there among the offspring? We're on number 3 here. Possible genotypes. Well, we figured it out. There's our genotypes there. We have two. Two different types of genotypes. Simple answer. How many possible phenotypes are there? There's our phenotypes. We've got 1. We've got 2. Now, keep in mind, the genotypes and the phenotypes, they don't always have to be the same. What's the probability of getting, possibility of getting a heterozygous, our vocab coming into play? It looks like 2 out of 4. That's 50% chance of it being heterozygous. What's the probability of being homozygous? You're probably using some common sense right now and saying, well, if it's 50 for one, it's going to be 50 for the other. What color is the female? Oh, we kind of cut this one off early. We talked about this already. Here she is up here. Heterozygous dominant. She has a dominant gene, which means she's got to be gray. And is it going to be next question? Yes, of course. What color is the male? We answered that one already. He's homozygous recessive. He has that recessive coat color, so he's going to be albino. Moving on to example 2, and we're going to let you fly a little bit more solo with this one. So, cross a homozygous gray female. Okay, let's think about that. Homozygous, the genes, homozygous means the genes have to be the same, and she's gray. So that means dominant. The same dominant, oh, she's gonna be capital G, capital G. And then heterozygous male, heterozygous means different. He's gotta have one of each. So that's gotta be capital G, small g. There it is. We just use some basic vocab and we're able to figure out what kind of genotypes these mice have. Let's put them in our Punnett square. We're going to put the female's genes on top. Capital G, capital G. The male is capital G, small g. Now for you, it's time to cross these. Okay, when you cross them, did you end up with the same thing that I have up here? If you did, good for you. If not, make sure you make the corrections. We'll go through it right now. This G and this G make up that box. Same thing here. It's kind of like multiplication tables back in the day when you were in 3rd or 4th grade and you went from the top row to the side and you found your multiplication. That's the way this works. And here's what I'd like you to do now. What genotypes and phenotypes do you see? All right, we have 2 different genotypes that happen. We've got homozygous dominant, heterozygous dominant. Those are 2 genotypes, and because they both have dominant genes in them, that all the offspring are going to be gray in this case. All right, I would like you to go through these questions on your own, and then we'll go through these and review them in just a second. Go ahead and do that. All right, let's review our questions that we have over here to see if you got yours right, and then I'm gonna let you fly solo for the next 2, and you're gonna turn this in for some credit. So, probability of getting gray offspring. Well, we looked at our phenotype over here, and it can only be 100%, which means of getting an albino, well, it's gotta be 0. How many possible genotypes? We found that there were 2 different genotypes here. 2 should have been your answer. How many phenotypes? We just had 1 with gray. The probability of getting a heterozygous, different alleles that make up the genotype. We've got heterozygous, we've got 1 here, we've got 1 here. That's gonna be 50%. And of course, if you're using some common sense, what's the probability of getting a homozygous? It's gonna be 50% as well. Genotype of the female, well, we had to figure that one out in order to do our Punnett square, and we found that she was capital G, and we found that the male, because he was capital G, small g, there is a dominant gene there, so he's gotta be gray as well. The next 2 you're gonna do on your own, and then you're gonna submit this because I wanna see how well you're understanding this. But I do wanna give you a little bit of guidance because some of these can be tricky sometimes. So let's find the genotypes of the different mice they're talking about, and then the rest is gonna be up to you. So cross a gray female. Okay, we know she's gray. So she's gonna have a dominant G there somehow. So let's make sure we got that. She's dominant, but her father was albino. Well, if he was albino, he had to be small g, which means he could only pass on a small g to her. So she's going to be capital G, small g. And then we're going to do a heterozygous meaning different. So we know that he's going to have a capital G and a small g. Okay, that's your hint for number 3. And then number 4, cross an albino female whose father was gray. Okay, let's think about that. She's albino. Well, there's only one way you can be albino, and that's if you're small g, whose father was gray. So if she got a small g somewhere, that father, he's gray, so he's definitely got a capital G, but he must also have a small g in him. But I don't know if that's important right now, so I'm going to just kind of erase that. With a gray male, okay, gray male, I know he's got to be at least a capital G because he's gray. But his mother was albino. She's a small g. That's important because she gave him that small g. So I think you have all the information you need to complete the rest of this assignment. Please do that and then submit this to me.